Hi guys, I'm Marie Conway. I'm one of the lead data scientists at Lloyds Banking Group, currently based in London in the UK. I take my coffee first thing in the morning.
Welcome to the MLOps Community Podcast, everyone. I am your host, Demetrios, and today I am with my man, Stephen, who is phoning in from the coolest city in the world, Berlin. What's up, dude?
Yeah, how you doing? Doing good?
See, I'm so good. I am so good, and we should probably mention, folks, that you're on the Berlin local chapter organization team, you and a bunch of other incredible people, too many to name, because Berlin's like the strongest, no, it's not the strongest, but it's one of the strongest chapters that we have. And we did a hackathon by the time this comes out, it'll be like a month or two ago, and had a blast doing it. We also were judging and saw some funny judging pieces. And I figured, you know what, dude? You got to come on and host a podcast with me because we have too much fun when we're together. You got a little stage fright, though, didn't you? Let's not lie.
It's like, usually like, I've been recording for podcasts and like when someone interviews you, it's easy. When you interview someone, it's a bit harder. You're like, oh, do I want to bring or something?
That's it, because I kept writing you on Slack, like, you ask the next question, but you had everything
off. My phone is away, everything. It's like, no one can bother me.
Yep, you were absolutely untouchable, and so that's fine, though. So, listeners, if you do not hear him that much in this episode, do not worry, because you will be back. We're going to have your own episode. It's just going to be me and you shooting the shit like we do, and when we have the occasional call. But for this conversation, I mean, it was awesome. Michelle is such an incredible human. I was laughing the whole way. Basically, she was putting me at ease, just cracking jokes the whole time, bringing such a fun and humorous light to such a serious topic. I mean, they're managing a lot of money. They're also spending a lot of money on their cloud migration.
Yeah, I was like, we're going to go back to the Google office in Berlin, and be like, hey, you get all that money.
Yeah, exactly. So she mentioned in this episode, I think they're going to allow us to keep this part in, that they are migrating to GCP and it is costing them $3 billion. And when she first said it, I understood million with an M. And then when she said it the second time, I was like, oh, no, that is a lot of money that we're talking about, and over a nice chunk of time. And so she just talked about the challenges that you face when going from fully on-premise, using everything that is tools for the on-premise world, to now going to a cloud scenario. And I know GCP is the main one, but she also mentioned that they're going to be using a few other cloud providers, I guess, so they do have that fail system in place. Yeah, the failover system. And that was an awesome piece. What were some of your key takeaways, though?
I think on my side, it was all like everything related to security, like especially working in tech, usually you kind of see security as like, oh, it just annoys me. I just want to write my code and everything. And the way she was saying it was like, yeah, I mean, when you're a bank, you manage like the thousands of so many people, and it's like, you can't make mistakes, So I think that was my key takeaway. It was like, yeah, that security, the monitoring of the ML models, everyone always talks about, we have monitoring, we have explainability is very important. But what they have for explainability, is amazing. Like, she was saying, like that feature is wrong, that part of the code is wrong, that's why your model is failing. I wish I would have that.
Something like that is a godsend. And of course, they are a highly regulated industry, so they can't afford to play it fast and loose, as they say. So it makes complete sense. I also think that there was some super fun stuff that she talked about when it comes to being a woman in the tech industry. We kind of went off on a tangent at the end there, and I found it enlightening to hear her perspective and her experience of how she was the only woman in her class at university, and then how she's basically lived through that scenario sometimes at her job and what that is. So it was cool. I enjoyed this conversation 100%, and I hope everyone else does too. Let's get into it. Let's just dive right in. If you could, though, while you're out here listening, hit that like or give us a 5-star review or subscribe, any of these things that you can do on wherever you are listening to your podcast. That would mean the world to me. And if you want to go above and beyond because you are one of those overachievers, send this episode to a friend and tell them they must listen. All right, let's jump into the conversation with Michelle.
Let's go.
We might as well just get into it. Let's get started. And where else to start besides? I mean, I'm not going to go right to the core and ask you about your GCP migration because I feel like we need to soften up the blows a little bit before we go deep down into the fun stuff. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how you came to be in tech and what your journey has been so far.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I have been working in the data and tech industry for about 12 years now. Not to give away my age, I'm 21 plus VAT in my head always. That's value-added tech. So I loved mathematics in school and I studied mathematical science for undergrad. Really enjoyed it. Studied it in Dublin. It's really good fun. And after that, I moved to London and I started working in investment banks. Went on to work in insurance, then went and worked with Amazon, BT for a bit. Worked for a data consultancy, and then 5 years ago I joined Lloyd's banking group. And when I joined, I was actually midway through a part-time master's in data science because I really wanted to upscale in that computer science theory that I didn't know in undergrad and really understand that programming metrics because I'd just been doing the statistical analytical side of things. And I had been obviously heavy lifting in big data and I could get that and understand that using SQL. But I really wanted to up things, and that's where I got to learn Python for the first time. I absolutely love it, and move into that more techie space from being just a statistician to being a data science and moving more so into like the machine learning engineering space and understanding those best principles. I suppose for me, I love to solve problems and puzzles and learn, so it all kind of lifted in nicely.
So that's one journey that I've seen being the harder of the two, and I say the harder of the two, going from like software engineering into data science, I think it lends itself better if you can do it, because I definitely can't. But then I think there's a lot of things that you need to focus on when you go from the statistics and math into software engineering and more of that engineering role. What are some key things that you mentioned, how you saw the best practices of being an engineer and better ways of doing things? What are some key pieces that you remember being like, oh yeah, that's actually very important if I do that, and I didn't realize it when I was just writing scripts or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. I think so. For me, I was really used to building models in production using SAS, and SAS is very like, it's built for you, little boxes, and it's like, I know it's very old school, like don't judge me, but you would be surprised that a lot of banks actually still have SAS live for their credit risk models, including the banking group. It does exist. So when I went to learn Python, I was like, what is this object-oriented programming? What do you mean I can construct everything from scratch myself and build it? It felt really, I felt exposed because you're trying to like, things just don't come packaged and wrapped for you to go build the models. You have to build a pipeline and everything from scratch. You have to think it through. And there's a lot of coding to it in a good way, but that means it's more flexible and it's more adaptable and it's quite creative as long as you are not terrified at the start like I was. So it's like, oh my God, programming is really hard. Few people do it.
So 100%. And then what got you over the hump? When did you know that you were comfortable with it?
I think once I got the basics of Python, like the standard library stuff, once I understood that, I find they're key, because when it comes to working on production code bases, yes, we do pip install libraries from like pandas, NumPy, like stats models, sklearn, like, and there's a rake of other PyTorch, etc. But being able to understand how to like loop through things, nested lists, nested dictionaries, be able to read that and understand it, and like being able to like click through code and writing things in modular code bases and navigating around them, because you could have repos that are like 30,000 lines of code. How do you get into that? Like nosedive right into it, because you need to. It's not built into the packages you've just installed. It's actually your code base. You need to be able to read that and understand that. So having the bare basics of Python, that's the fundamentals that help you.
So well put. That is such a fun piece of the whole coding journey, is just like, okay, who was the last person to do this? Where's the comments on this code? Why is it not well documented?
I'm not going to lie. My guilty pleasure is looking at Git annotate to be like, who has worked on this and created this way? And it may have been something that happened over the last 6 years, but it's still worth looking at, because everyone has their different styles. So like understanding it, like, and learning it and how people have involved, and readability is really important. But some people like writing things in one line that does 50 things, but that's okay.
Exactly. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because there's a few people in the community and that we've interviewed over the last couple of months that talk about how important it is for data scientists to understand clean coding fundamentals. And so it feels like you learned that maybe just trial by fire, or like baptism by fire, can I say?
I definitely learned the hard way. I remember I was building a model in a notebook, and I had all the data processing in this notebook. I had all the different versionings that I needed to do. I had like multiple models built, and I remember I sent it to an MLE, a machine learning engineer at the time. I remember he wrote back this one line. He's like, it goes without saying this notebook needs tidying up. Because I had like massive Python scripts. I hadn't followed any best practices with modular code. And now I'm like, oh my God, they were so right. I need things like cleaner, easy to use. Like notebooks should be to like display things like plots, graphs, outputs of data frames, not hold like 500 lines of code like I had been doing. So I definitely learned the hard way, and I was not doing it perfectly from the start.
And what do you do now? What's the way that you do it? I imagine you're still using notebooks to explore.
I'm still using notebooks, but I am very big on GitHub and version control and writing things in modular fashions and following the dry principles of do not repeat yourself, and like not hard coding variables into functions, especially if it's like int or like doc strings, like having it in one place in configs that you can like whip it around the code base, and being very careful with how I structure things. And even now I've got junior data scientists on the teams, and I'm like month by month training them, and I'm trying to embed those best practices before I just give them a notebook to like explore and do whatever they want on, because I feel like it's harder to revert it when you have a spider's web in a notebook. But if you build it up bit by bit, it's a little bit easier, hopefully. I'll let you know how it turns out.
Oh, that's so classic.
And yeah, and how do you go to train those people, to train those juniors? Like, do you train them one by one, or is it?
At the moment, it's just in small groups of 3 to 5. I'm very big on mob programming, which is where, you know, you code between 3 to 6 people is like the optimal kind of thing. So having little study groups like that also helps when you're like showing someone something new, because they can bounce off each other. I kind of find if you're just teaching one person on their own and they go away to look at something, they might get stuck, and having a peer there would be like, oh, I'm stuck in the same thing. Hey, we try solve it, because I might not spot the little thing that they're on, because I might see the bigger thing that's further along down the line, if that makes sense.
I mean, I obviously want to go right into the GCP migration, because I've been thinking about it ever since we hit record. And I feel like there are some things, you left a few breadcrumbs in the way that you were talking about the code of what you find at a bank that has been around for 50 plus years, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, so the group altogether, they have about 16 brands. There's 70,000 colleagues. It's over 300 years old.
Wow. Okay.
It'd be like between all the brands, because the main brands would be like Halifax Bank, Lloyds Bank, you'll have Bank of Scotland and then Scottish Widows, the insurance, as well as loads of other brands for insurance, private wealth investment that I won't get into. So because of that size and scale, everything is joined together under one group. And a lot of our stuff is very much on-prem when it comes to data, because we are risk averse. We take data very seriously in Lloyd's. Like it's customers' financial details, products, like that has to be well looked after, well catered for. It can't just be, hey, we'll leave it over there, it'll be fine. There's loads of risks and security that is like checking everything, which means we do have a lot of...
I would want that in my bank. That's kind of what I would err towards the side of that.
Exactly. So it's like Fort Knox. Everything is well protected, but it does mean because we've protected everything, we've built everything in-house and all our data's on-prem, we're now trying to migrate that legacy, that rich data onto cloud. And we've picked Google Cloud. We do have other little providers, but that's our main agenda. And in the last 5 years, we've set aside 3 billion to do that.
With a B.
Would it be? But it's a big journey, because it's like you can't just do it willy-nilly. So we've started doing it in releases where you like get a small versioning, but the environments you get are very restricted, locked down. It's not like we're getting GCP, like me and you could open in a website right now and give them our credit card. We're not getting that version. We're getting the one that's been scanned through security, that's like fit for purpose. We can't just give colleagues anything. They can go spin up massive costs. We may have had stuff in the past that was running overnight in GCP and hit 100K on something. So it's like, we can't do that. We need to be sustainable. And how we do that is very much, it is difficult because we're so large. Like we've got 70,000 colleagues across the whole group, which means that when we're doing this, you've got multiple departments of like hundreds of people trying to drive this forward. So it's like a gigantic ship. Like think the Titanic, you're trying to move that with everyone in it and like steer it in the right direction. It's great when everything goes to flow, when everyone's in the wrong line and we're all like steering the same way, but sometimes things veer off and like people are like, it's like scattered cats, but on another level that you're trying to get things done. And you also have live production models that you're trying to protect because the business use them and their own, and it's like, you need to take this model, rebuild it into GCP and have parallel runs and they like on, and then you have to move the data as well, not just the code. And it's entertaining because it's like the stress is real and the intensity is real, but it is moving. It feels slow, but it is moving at a pace that when we get there, it's going to be this beautiful thing. What I feel like it's going to be this beautiful thing, but between then and now, that's going to be the real journey of like all hands on deck and trying to like muck in together to get it done.
But you set aside like 5 years to do this? How long?
I think it was a couple of years. I don't know the exact plan. All I'm going is by what we've released publicly, and that was one of the bits of public information that we put live. But we will see how long the journey goes. Right now it's in process and all wheels are in motion. You do see good things like environments being created and you're like, oh, this actually could work when we're using this, which is good to see, but we just want to keep those releases coming and seeing the end version that is the usable thing that we can now start moving those live models into.
And is it mostly focused on machine learning models that are going to run on Google, or is it everything related to Lloyds Bank?
They're trying to move as much as their data as possible to GCP. Because they want to be really sustainable with like, let's create data products, have the proper risk management, have the proper metadata, have everything in one place that it's usable to store. And as well, it's more manageable when it's rather than just like a little bit. Obviously, some bits are now in GCP for testing and streaming and stuff, but we need to like kind of move everything, because how are we going to manage 2 different systems?
Yeah.
Speaking of 2 different systems, you mentioned something there that I think is worth digging into if we can, about how effectively, before you're fully migrated, you're running 2 systems. And so how do you know which one is running? How do you keep tabs on what you've been able to do? It just seems like you just doubled all of your complexity. Definitely.
That bit I'm going to enjoy seeing because I've not seen it done yet. But we're going to have to be so careful because you need to make sure like the two systems that you have, the two models you have live, like what's feeding into both of them is the same. And then checking what's coming out of the both of them is the same. Because if it's not, it's like, well, something's gone awry, and like, how are you going to explain it? Because then essentially you've got two different models now. It's not the same ins and outs. So we are doing a lot of preparation on how we do all that checking and how we make sure the data is matching when it feeds in to make sure it's like the same data going in. Because if there's slight discrepancies, it's going to like make a difference because these models are live training. It's not just like some of them are pickled and it's like feed stuff into it. It's like a living and breathing thing that operates and moves forward with time. So yeah, it is going to be interesting having these two systems. Hopefully it won't be for long. I think the parallel runs will be about like 2 to 3 months once it's up in action. And then we shall say goodbye to the legacy one that we've had at having a little funeral and be like, thank you very much for your time. You did great.
The thing that I was thinking about too on that is any small discrepancy, and I imagine upstream you're going to have so many different ways that you're dealing with the data that it could cause big changes downstream in what the model is outputting. So debugging that is also going to be a lot of fun to figure out, okay, well, on-prem, it's working like this, and we are using these tools. How much of what you are shifting over is just an exact replica and how much is an upgrade or new? Because you'll have to tell me, I always make jokes about banks running COBOL. Are you all running COBOL in production still? Is there some?
No, but have you heard of Nexus? We scan all Python code like for security, and we have it in our own repository that we'll all pip install from, so we don't actually pip install from remote websites. It's just a security thing to make sure there's nothing coming in externally that could be vicious or malicious kind of thing. But no, we're not using, but I'm sure we're using other things very equally as legacy.
Yeah, but actually, like talking about Nexus, that's a funny one because I remember Diego Oppenheimer about a year or two ago was talking about how pip installing things, like you pip install these packages and you don't know what's in them. And also now it feels like there's a lot of you can just download a model from Hugging Face and you have no idea what's in that either. And so there's a lot of things that we kind of play it a little bit loose, and sometimes it comes back to bite you in the ass.
It does. And I think people are doing this new thing. Well, it's not a new thing, but it's where, do you know, if you misspell a Python package where you do a pip install, someone has like intentionally done the misspelling version and like may have something like vicious and malicious in there, like malware, and that you've now installed that. So even though for us as data scientists going to use those packages, it has to go through all our clearance and security, and it might fail every now and again because it's like Fort Knox. But I'd rather it do that because I don't think I've ever seen a virus on like a laptop, my work laptop ever, because everything is like so strict and so secure.
We found that out trying to record this. We had to move to your phone.
We did. I couldn't use Zoom. I couldn't use Teams. I sent emails with like Microsoft Teams links. But yeah, no, you received them, but it wouldn't let me like add you in. So everything's really secure. Even my personal email, because I have access to data on my work laptop, I can't send external attachments because it's seen as a security risk, and rightly so, because it's like, what if that attachment had data or something? It's to minimize the risk of anything leaving.
That's classic.
Yeah, but maybe to follow up on that, so you know, when you train machine learning models, usually you need to access some data, and you know, with other companies, usually some startups can be a bit like free flow. You know, you just access everything. How does it work on your side as a data scientist there?
So we presently have data in our global data warehouse that uses Teradata. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. A lot of banks use Teradata. It's quite old school, robust, and we are migrating that to BigQuery in Google. But anytime currently someone queries any tables in that database, someone like my boss is responsible for them and will receive emails and alerts every time a certain table is queried. and even more emails and alerts if someone was to query, let's say, a customer table and they just pull back one record because it's like, well, what are you doing with that one record? That's private information. Obviously, to get to those tables is extra security and clearance. It's not like everyone has access to, but they are very careful with governance of like who has access to what and who governs it and how it operates. Like, it's not a free for all. Everything is well documented, monitored and reviewed, and access is removed every quarter if someone doesn't physically go in there as a line manager and say, yeah, I'm vouching for this person.
Is there a lot of that information that gets removed by the data engineers before the data scientists can even see it?
We would still have access to the same source that data engineers have. We do. So we kind of have two types of data engineers in the bank. We'll have the data engineers that just work on our core stack, so purely coding in SQL. And then we'll have data engineers that are coding in Python and SQL. So that we kind of call them more machine learning data engineers just because of that Pythonic element and the different skill sets between the two. So it depends. We can, like, as data scientists, we can see like all the levels all the way through, but we mightn't have the access to manipulate them.
Yeah. And you mentioned something before about when you're going from one data, what did you call it? Teradata to then you're migrating to BigQuery. Or is there other stuff that you get to migrate to? Like, did you go on a shopping spree? Is that why it's 3 billion?
I would love that. But it's been estimated. Those books are very carefully monitored to make sure it's not an overspending thing or a shopping spree. There is so many committees, risk views, and forums that everything goes through to make sure that everything has been done and spent responsibly. And I can say it's been done very, very responsibly because I think we're underspending more so than anything else because we're being very careful to be like, do we really need this? Is it fit for purpose? Are we bringing something in that's just waste? We don't want that. It has to be what we need. It has to pass all the risks. It has to be protected of customer data. I think a lot of banks are moving to GCP. I know HSBC are doing it. So it's not just us. I can imagine that's on this lovely journey to cloud from on-prem.
Yeah. But it does feel like you're opening up a whole new world, right? Because I think there's a lot more vendors and service providers that you can access that have a more robust offering for cloud offerings as opposed to on-prem. That might just be me. Like, that might just be my bias, but it's interesting to think about how now you get to kind of explore, and I imagine your inbox is also going to get more blown up by all of these vendors. As before, you could have just said, we're on-prem, like, fuck off.
Yeah, on-prem, they don't know. It was interesting recently. We had consultancies come in to be like, oh, we can build you this like amazing model. We can do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, you do realize our current tech stack is like Domino Data Lab. It's on-prem. Have you heard of Domino? They had great speciality in AWS. They had great speciality in GCP. So it was a little bit like, oh, really sorry to burst your bubble, and I'm sure you're very skilled, but like, this is what we have. It's not the best, but we have to make do.
Yeah.
And maybe to follow up on that, actually, it's like, now, as in, like, if you were to graduate now, you would probably look for a company where you can work on AWS or GCP or something, right? So how does it work to actually hire, when you look for new people, when you want to hire new people, how does it work? How can you sell that stack as well to make it like, yeah, that's cool to work here as well?
Yeah, SaaS. Sell them SaaS. You must be an amazing salesperson.
Not used SaaS in Lloyd, thank God. I gave up my SaaS skills before I joined the group. I will say it may seem like we have lots of legacy stuff and security bits and pieces, but we also have 30 million customers and we have all of their financial data and we have the ability to do good things for them. And all those risks are in there and those checks are gone through to make sure we minimize any damage that happens. Because if you think about it, imagine you're a developer and you're sitting here and you're writing code and you've written some code that then affects customers' accounts, and let's say they go to their ATMs and it spits out all the wrong money.
Hey, Laszlo here. If you're serious about MLOps, you hit subscribe right now.
Like, you don't want someone calculating the wrong things and there not being checks and validations in place to make sure it's safe and secure. So there is massive satisfaction in knowing what you're doing makes a difference to like people's finances, and it's done in a really safe, secure way. No digs at any of the tech people. They're very great, but if you want to do loads of marketing, fill your boots at Meta and Google and Apple. Fill your boots. If you want to make a difference in financial services with customer products, more than welcome to join.
There you go. Yeah. No, oh my God. I mean, no shade at N26. We have a friend, Frata, who works there. He comes to the meetups in Berlin.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes I worry about putting too much money in there in the account, but because I don't know if they take this same mentality and the same type of rigor. And it feels like you need that. You need those checks and balances, and you need that airtight, just like air-gapped situation because of the amount of customers you have, the amount of money that you're playing with, the amount of data you have. All of that is at a scale that's gigantic, and it could cause real harm if there is anything bad to happen.
Exactly. And I know it's not the most sexiest thing to be like, we're regulated by the FCA, but thank God we are. Like, so that's on like Google may get to operate with like different things. Monzo will get to operate in different ways. And like, and all the fintechs have their flexibility, but we are very much making sure that things are right by society. And one of Lloyd's like purpose is to help Britain prosper, and to do that in the most safe and secure way with putting people first and stability first. So I am really grateful that they do have those checks in place and that the FCA is there giving those guidelines, and they are met just to reduce any massive catastrophe, that everything is well, like the risks of it are constantly being looked at. Whereas I imagine Google and Facebook are thinking of different risks.
Yes. So this is a perfect segue into one of the things that I really was excited to talk to you about, besides the GCP migration, and that is when things do go wrong. Because inevitably, I think that we're all humans, and there are sometimes that things do fall over. So what has been your experience there, and how do you mitigate those problems when they do arise?
We have definitely had that, and we do have model validations in place. So one example of one that I can give you, on certain models, it will check to see if features are statistically significant. So it can do those p-value checks, and if it's above a certain threshold that we have set, it'll fall over. It will not produce a forecast. It will not build that model. And the way that the pipeline has been engineered is that it'll pop up in the UI to be like, hey, this has crashed halfway through. We know we have a ton of tables and pipelines and structures, but I can tell you from the way we've engineered it, it's like, it is this specific component, it's this specific model, it's for this specific reason. So you know where exactly to go and look through, and like having enough information that you can then go explain to business and go, hey, these models have crashed. This is the reason why we're checking these features. And we actually found during COVID, I know COVID changed things for everyone, and it was a very difficult time during the pandemic, but it also changed how people were using their money and how they were behaving. So for example, December, really expensive time of the year for everyone. Lockdown, no one's leaving their house. There's no Christmas parties. Things are stripped back a lot more. You don't have to visit friends and relatives. You were saving a fortune, which meant like customers are saving more, but then in January, they might spend more because January sales are out and they're like, why not treat yourselves, online shopping, we're going to be home anyway. So we found that there was so many products and so many models that we had to apply COVID exclusion periods just to be like, we are going through a time in our lives where there is no point including this data because it's just off the walls Like no one could predict COVID, and our models couldn't predict it either. So we had to apply those periods because it meant all our model validations were falling over. And I'm so glad they were there so it could help catch it. But obviously it wasn't sustainable letting that go on every month. It was like, okay, there's a clear pattern here and it's the data right now. So we need to just get through it.
That is so fascinating to know that it's like so basically you're saying if things are too much to one side or the other, like you set the guardrails, and if the statistical models go, or if it hits I can't remember how you said it just there, but if it goes off the guardrails in any way, you not only are able to tell where and why, but you can say this is the root cause. And so whoever's debugging can go and figure that out real quick.
Which also explains why we'll have some models that might have 30,000 lines of code because it has that like explainability engineered into it. And when I say explainability, I don't just mean pip installing SHAP and sticking it on top of the Black Bats model, because that seems to be the cure for explainability anytime you talk to anyone that's not been on a production code base. I feel like the explainability of being able to pinpoint the function, the data, the model type is so much more important. And yes, it may take more lines to write up, but doesn't it save you more time in debugging when it does hit production and kills out?
Yeah. When it comes to the producers, the producers, if you want to use that term, of the data upstream, and things happening outside of your model, but then your model gets it and it is tainted because of it, like how do you deal with that? Do you just pass the buck to the data engineer and say, hey, not my problem, you messed with my model, something's wrong over there, go figure it out? Or do you also work with those teams to figure out why there's a problem?
So I suppose I know what you completely mean. We do try eliminate that from the teams that I have worked with. And you will have data engineers and data scientists in Scrum teams working together to reduce that, hey, it's your fault, no, it's your fault, you know, the finger pointing game.
Yeah.
And I think that does help a lot, because you need both people involved in that, like on a daily basis, and interacting, communicating together. Like you don't want it to be these two big separate teams that have, you know, disputes. You want people to collaborate and get on and understand each other. So when it comes to ML, we do have data scientists and data engineers in parallel. That being said, we do sometimes have DBAs, database administrators, that may have from time to time gone into data and changed things that are completely outside of our control. And we
it's a classic story. It's always the DBAs too. I think they're
super valuable, but they're super they're in their own little not world or box, but they're in their own little nook. And you're so far removed from them that it's like, hey, something went wrong. And by the time you figure it out, it all roads lead back to the DBA had done something to change things. And I feel like that does come with not legacy, but with really high security stuff, that there is those layers that you are so far removed away from the DBAs that it, by the time you get to them, it's like, okay, we've already had a fix to this, that we rewiped anything that went through these null values or replaced it with something else. So it does happen. And I think that's why it's really important having data engineering validations to be like, hey, has the distribution of this data changed? If so, how has it changed? Why has it changed? Do we want to overwrite it in a way that it'll make it more usable to go into the model, or do we need to completely unpack it?
That's funny you say that with the DBAs, because my friend Chiro was talking about how when he was the head of AI for his company, and he met with the DBAs, and he was saying how for them it was so hard to grasp the idea of immutable data. And like, huh? What? Immutable data? Like, you can't change anything? And there's no, you don't touch data. That's just it's off limits. And they couldn't grasp that concept.
Agree. And I feel like that's a concept where we need snapshots or something, or and then if there's meant to be like a
Roll
change, yeah, you can roll back. We do actually do that a lot on the models. We snapshot the data every month so that if there's a problem with the data that comes out next month, we can be like, well, look, we can still keep it rolling on like the thing that we have last month. It's not like everything falls over, especially when the businesses are using UIs for these models, to make sure that something is there for them to work on. But yeah, it is interesting to hear DBAs don't understand the concept of immutable. I get it, because they're used to working in a different way to the rest of us. Like, we know how to like keep data mutable, but also build a pipeline that you can do loads of pre-processing. You can go back through all the steps and you have all that code and that logic and you can see it. Whereas they might whip something up and be like, okay, cool, I've created this table, I'll overwrite it, put it into this, and I'll delete the logic in the meantime. And everyone's wondering how we ended up with the final masterpiece. But it happens.
That's classic. And the other piece that I wanted to chat with you about was you coming into the tech field and being able to talk to people who are starting out in this field. Are there things that you're thinking about that have drastically changed, right? From when you started and now when you have spent time learning, and also just because of the whole AI and generative AI boom that's happening, what are things that you think about with those junior engineers that you relate with, and how do you see their job being different as opposed to when you were coming in to the field?
Absolutely. I feel like when I came in, it was a time when I was in secondary school, we had no Wi-Fi. We had those brick button phones. And then when I was in university, Wi-Fi was just about coming in, but it was normally like the cafe shop. So when I entered the workplace, that's when I had like a smartphone for the first time and Wi-Fi for the first time. Whereas you have like Gen Zs entering the workplace now, they know a phone like the back of their hand. Like, they are ninjas on the thing. And fair enough, there may be a lot of like TikTok videos, but generally like super smart guys like that know how to use tech, and they're amazing with it. And I totally get that. And I think their gift is absorbing information really quickly, because we've gotten into this era now where we're learning more, but we have to learn it faster. Like, I feel like I had to learn loads, but then with the tech that's come out in mobile phones, it's like everything is moving so much quicker. Like, we are changing constantly the different modern tech bits that we are using. You can't just learn one method and be like, right, I'm done. You need to know how to apply it. And with code, like, new methods and tips and tricks are constantly coming out in new releases. You need to roll with those. You need to like being able to get comfortable with things constantly moving. Like, you can't just stop learning and be like, oh, I've done my undergrad, I've done my master's. Like, for me, I'm like, no, I need to constantly learn. I need to know how to access the latest documentation for these Python packages. I need to understand how things are being implemented and maintained and operating. I would say for our early careers workforce, it's like, yes, do roll with that documentation, but don't just roll with what's here and now and what's coming. Learn to roll with like what has been. So like going into old code bases, being able to understand the logic that was written then. Because with this migration, I think a fellow engineer recently said, and I think the statement was right, some people's code that they've written can last longer than their careers, and they don't realize that. And that like really blew my mind. I was like, oh God, not that we need to like be careful with every single little thing, but we do need to be mindful that what if the code you write now like outlasts your career?
So much pressure.
Oh, but it does mean like we should take things seriously. We should really think it out and like do it in a good way. But I do feel for the Gen Zs now, like it's great how they learn right now instantly and they're prepared for the future. But if they're to go through an old legacy code base, I imagine they might struggle because there's no pretty documentation to guide you through it. That you have to weave through it and understand and go backwards. Like it's same through. It's like if a project is using a certain version of Python, if you go back to that version in those release notes, there's certain methods that don't exist back then. It's like, well, how do they get around it? Oh, they did this. Being able to understand that logic and actually go through the legacy stuff, I think that's still hugely important and valuable. It's not always about the new stuff.
And maybe to follow up on that, at the beginning you said that you learned Python by checking out the documentation of the standard library, for example. So is it something you would still advise for newcomers? Like, because everyone's going to be like generative AI and stuff, but they could be like, yeah, we don't really care about the standard library. Like,
So I am.
everything.
I think it is super important, and I am trying to teach the new joiners on the team to be like, hey, this is how you use the basic Python, like strings, lists, loops, for loops, etc. And here's how you create functions. And now, okay, cool, we're moving into installing packages. We're going to learn pandas and NumPy. We're going to look at the documentation so we can understand from source how things were meant to be implemented, because the developers have included examples. Like, that's super useful to be doing it. That being said, I do think Gen AI is like hugely valuable. So me being dyslexic, I love getting it to write out my LinkedIn posts. I'm not going to lie. It does it for me. I'd be like, I've done this, I've gone to this thing, write it out because my spelling grammar is going to be awful. But I have been using it to be like, hey, write out some training material, please, explaining what pandas is. And it does write me out something and it looks really pretty, but it's very basic and there's no depth to it. And I'm just like, as a developer, I would rather be nose deep into the developer release notes than what I'm getting back from ChatGPT, because it's like, it's surface level. It's not that domain knowledge. So yes, people are like, it will change our lives for the better. Just like calculators helped versus, remember people with pen and paper? It's just going to be that situation. People are like, oh, it's going to take away jobs now. Like, it's not. It's going to enhance our lives for the better, for the good. We're all going to embrace it and use it. And I personally can't wait to get ChatGPT in the bank. Might take years, but we'll get there.
I was going to ask, I mean, it's the hypey question, right? But how or what are you doing with large language models, if anything?
So we are doing a lot. I think there's a lot to be said in terms of we have documentation in Confluence. Like, it's one of the things the bank uses for all its auditing, all its written stuff. It's all there. I think if we're currently looking at building internal large language models to hopefully be able to look at that internally so that it's completely safe. It's not leaving anywhere. So you could just be like, hey, from my team's Confluence, hey, pull back all the models that used a random forest, or hey, pull back all the models that had this kind of thing for customers. I think that would be super valuable and usable, because I do speak to friends that work in consultancies and they've installed ChatGPT on their documentation. They're like, it's actually really helpful because when you're going to client site and you need to look at previous use cases, it just goes boom, 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 boom. So we kind of need to embrace things like that. I know we need to be careful with the security, but we also need to be like, hey, it could actually save a lot of time, save a lot of value to do it for us. I would love though as well if it wrote me emails, because me writing an email, I think I sent one yesterday, took about 3.5 hours. It's nothing special, but it takes a long time.
That is one of the main use cases, I think, that we saw in the LLM in production report that we put out. And it was one of the cooler use cases was managers getting up to speed really quickly with how and what their teams have been up to, because they could just ask an LLM, what's going on with this? Where are we at with the budget? Or what's the latest updates, right? And so you wouldn't have to ping the employees. You could just ask the LLM. And then if there was anything that you couldn't get from the LLM, you could graduate up to the actual person.
Yeah, no, that means I'm smiling because I was recently thinking about my own team and how, like, we're an MLOps team and we live within the business. It's really cool. But we would have team members that won't be technical, but we need them for like the governance and the risk and stakeholder management. And we use GitHub Enterprise quite a lot for all our models. It's really useful. I was trying to get some of our non-technical team members to embrace using it. It was like you're saying with like getting the MLLs to like come back with your forecast. I was like, like GitHub Enterprise can show you everything the team's doing, and this is how you can check and you can see all the great work. And it was I felt like I was explaining to my 90-year-old grandmother how to use a mobile phone. It was interesting.
Pulling on that thread, not the 90-year-old grandmother one, but the the other piece on your MLOps team and all these different stakeholders that you have, I imagine you have to be constant communication with so many different people. Who are those people and what are they? Why do you have to talk with them, basically? What are the different stakeholders that you're dealing with?
Well, we have to talk with them because if you think about it from a bank's perspective, you're going to have stakeholders that are business people that know the business products and the history inside out. Like you're going to have someone that knows the mortgages books and products for the last 10 years in their head. Everything is there. Like they are an internal database, if that makes sense. And likewise, savings products, the savings stakeholders, they will know every single thing. They will know when the financial crisis hit, what happened, when and why. Again, all internal databases. Credit cards, guys, the same. They will know how things operate, how different banks merged at different times. What. So you have all these really skilled individuals who are subject matter experts in their area. So that's where we do have like non-technical members of the team that do that stakeholder management and have those relationships built with them. So they know what they want and need. And then they'll obviously tell our team like this is what the business is looking for. Can we incorporate that into our delivery? Like they would like to see something next sprint with regards to this model and that model. And they really help because they do all the communications engagement, which means like the technical team can just get on with the technical work and not have to worry about that liaisons, because we do have quite a few because we are within the business. It's like everything looking at the consumer lending products and other customer facing bits and pieces that we do need to look at. So it can be very time consuming, but we do have the right people in place taking care of that so that the technical work is not taken from those colleagues.
Because you're dealing, if I understand this correctly, you have almost like a translator or a buffer layer between.
I feel like we have maybe not a translator. We do have translators as well. We do the central data office that has translator that goes out to sell things and translate them back. We do business leads that will do kind of like, hey, what do you work on? What are your requirements? I do feel like it is a set of skills that involves a lot of patience and a lot of being a people person and understanding and like managing that relationship, which needs patience at the same time. I think that's something that that's on my development, shall we say. But I'm definitely much more the tech side of things, like black and white, why we do this, why we do that. So being able to like manage that human interaction, I think is a massive skill set that our team would drown without having the people on it that can do it.
So I wanted to talk to you about being a woman in the tech industry. It feels like when I think we have 4 women listeners in the world around the globe. And so
Get me.
speaking for those 4, yes. Like, what are specific challenges or obstacles that you feel like you've gone through, and how have you navigated them?
So for me, I had a really interesting experience in the sense that for primary and secondary school, I went to like an all-girls convent school. And then for university, I went and I was the only girl in my class. And it was a complete flip that I was just like, oh wow, this, like why is there not more girls here? Like I know like in secondary school there was 90 girls in my class, there was only 10 people doing advanced maths. I didn't realise when I went to university it'd just be me. So for me it was a bit of a shock, but then I kind of realised the people that were there, they were all super driven by mathematics, just like me, and we were all competing with each other in a healthy way. Like we all wanted to be number one, and I really enjoyed that competitive, that like learning from each other. And I'll say this much, it was like a class of like 15 people. I was the only girl. I'm still really close with those guys. Like became really strong friends. They're all working in the data industry, keep in touch. It's been super valuable. And I think because of that really good, strong foundations and experience, when it came to the workplace, yes, I did join companies where sometimes the management would be like, oh, by the way, you'd be the only lady on your team. And I'm like, that's okay. I've coped in the past. I will cope now. And I do see it. But more and more, I will say the pipeline of women coming in, it is improving. Like it's not just one token girl on that team. Sometimes it will happen that as I'm progressing, I've gone now into more leadership as a lead data scientist, still doing hands-on tech, but the other half is the managerial operations behind the scenes. And I do find I will end up being the only woman in the room in meetings. And you do have that thing again. And I think for me, the biggest hindrance I've had is probably my lack of football knowledge. needs to get better. It just needs to get better because like understanding everyone's culture and embracing that, like I think makes a massive difference. And people are passionate about different things in life and being able to understand and relate to those passions, I think is hugely valuable regardless of what the passions are.
Even if it is football, that is awesome.
One day I will perfect defining the offside rule. One day I will, promise.
And yeah, maybe also to follow up on this one is like, what do you think we should do? I mean, we as like, people working in tech to help that, maybe to have like more women and women plus in general.
Yeah, I do think so. There is a few things if you do look at it, like from schools encouraging more girls to take up STEM subjects like science, technology, engineering, maths. Because if you look at like in the UK, if you look at the statistics, like every year, about 20 to 30% of the students that go into these degrees are women. And then if you look at the ones that graduate and come out, 24,000 women graduate from a STEM subject every year in the UK. Like the workforce in the UK is like what, 16 million? 24,000. Like tech is booming. The pipeline is like so small. And it's like encouraging them from schools is super valuable, but also in the workplace, if there is, like you will see it that engineers, data scientists will be 4 times more male data scientists than females. Like just being an ally for women there, like if they're in a meeting and someone's like talking over them, like to speak up and be like, hey, hang on, someone's speaking, like that's hugely important. I know it's like the small things like that can make a big difference, because I do feel like it can be a really good place to work and learn with people, even if the diversity isn't 50-50 or if it isn't perfect. If people are kind, courteous and helpful, it shouldn't matter what your gender is.
Yeah, I know from organizing the conferences that it is, I try really hard to make sure that we get strong representation from everybody, different colors and genders and ethnicities, whatever it is. And it's a lot of work to go out there, but I think that there's some incredible work being done by females in the field right now, and it's super cool to see. And so whenever we get the chance, I love to highlight them. And this is actually, as a coincidence, this is my second podcast today, and the last podcast that I recorded was also with a female guest, so it's super cool to see that. Yeah.
But I think it's good because if you are spending that time to get like presenters at the conferences that are all diversities, it means when the people go to attend and see that, they'll be like, oh, that's cool. That's like someone that kind of represents me on that stage. Oh, maybe I could be more technical in that space, and it kind of inspires. And it's that natural hidden role model that people don't think about, but like it's hugely important. People feel connected and they see things that they can relate to, and it's like I'm really glad to hear that you're another female podcast interviewer.
I felt really weird. I'm just gonna be straight with you. When I would ask different people, hey, like, do you know anybody that would be great to speak? And then so some people that I was close with, it would be like, hey, do you know anybody that's great to speak? And then like preferably female, because I already had, 90% males that I knew, and I just know a bunch of males. And so we already were over-indexed on the male gender, right? And then when I didn't have to, but I wanted to find more females. And so trying to find females, it was just like, I felt so awkward trying to be like, so I remember we were in this call with NVIDIA, and we were talking to them, and it was like, NVIDIA's a gigantic company. They've definitely got females that work there, right? And so we're talking to them, and they're like, can we speak? And I'm like, you can totally speak, but it has to be a female that speaks, because we have to highlight like some incredible people from your company that are females. And it just feels so awkward sometimes when I ask that, right? And it's almost like,
but you're not doing it to be like rude to the male employees. You're trying to be like, hey, I'm trying to break the norm and the stereotypes so that people don't think that all these companies are just guys. And you're trying to do that in a really courteous way. I will say I am an ambassador for Women in Data, and it's a network of around 35,000 women that work in data, mainly in the UK, but they have expanded around, so some in Europe and America. So if you are looking for female,
Oh yeah, perfect. I go right to the source. That's amazing.
I'm sure you will have plenty of women that would only love to talk about MLOps and to get more diversity and leave out the awkwardness of like, so any other types of people.
I'm telling you, it was like, yeah, there's 2 other women on our team, and I had to like ask them, like, is it weird that I'm asking that when I was after the meeting? Like, is it weird that I'm like forcing it to only be a female?
No, I think that's something in the group we are very big on that. If we do create panels and stuff like that, trying to have it diverse as possible so that it's not. Sometimes it's hard to do that because especially if it's a really senior leadership panel and you're like, oh God, there's 10 people and we can only find 1 or 2 women because unfortunately they don't exist yet in that space.
Yeah.
But I have to say also, like, I attended a conference which was women plus speakers only, and men were allowed to like just attend the conference. And even from my point of view, I thought it was way more inclusive, than what you would have usually, and it was actually very inspiring as well to see, like, yeah,
You
it was
didn't
amazing.
feel left out?
Oh no, well, it was like I'm totally fine with that. But I just felt it was amazing, and it was like a very different vibe actually to like usual conference, and I really really enjoyed it. So I hope we'll have also more of those later.
Yes.
No, we definitely will.
When it comes to the virtual conference that we did, I would say we had probably 30% female speakers, and somebody wrote in the feedback form, like, oh, it's so good to see 50-50. Like, people felt like just with the 30%, it felt like there's way more than normal.
Exactly, because it can be such a gap that sometimes it is so easily to fall into, not the trap, but just, again, that norm, that stereotype. I went to the PyData conference in London recently, and I think I remember 2 women speaking. 2. I imagine for that planning, it might not have been actively sought to have a balanced speaker set, because if you don't actively seek it, it ends up being very skewed.
Yep, exactly. That's what it is. It's too easy to not have it be very important. And if you don't actively try to find females, because I remember I was getting so stressed, and we would be looking at the speakers, and it's just like, man. And I'm sitting there like, we have to find more females. We have only men. Like, I canceled anybody that would reach out to me and say, hey, is there another speaking spot? And it was basically towards the end, it was like, no, unless you are female or like your co-founder or whoever is female, like, we cannot have anybody else. Or the other piece, and this is probably gonna make me sound horrible, but it's like, or you're paying us. And so if you're gonna sponsor or you're female, then I can find a spot for you. But if you're just,
But at the end of the day, it costs money to do the conference, and like having people that are being the sponsors, like, it wouldn't happen otherwise. So it's kind of like a fair shout in terms of like
There you
the
go.
financials need to be covered.
You understand. I appreciate your understanding of it. It's like, I felt so bad sometimes when it's like, yeah, I do want to find a way to get you in there, but no, we're like saving these spots because I'm looking for female speakers. So, all right, we made like way bigger of a thing out of this than we needed to. I think that's how we can end it. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you talking to us about everything from your path into tech, the GCP revolution that you're going through, the way that you make sure you don't have problems at the bank and how careful you are, and then what you do to mitigate problems when they do arise. And in the end there, the whole advice that you would give to people coming into the field, and how it has been in your experience to be a female in this field, and how we can hopefully have more of them.
Exactly. We're definitely moving in the right direction, and it's a cool space to be in. So no, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. It's a really good podcast, and it's been amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
This is Skylar. I lead machine learning at Health Rhythms. If you want to stay on top of everything happening in MLOps, subscribe to this podcast now. 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 Now.